Come, Nerevar, come, gaze upon the Elder Scrolls games that have been released over the years. Let us honor the sixth house in the Tribe Unmourned and review each game. The Elder Scrolls. Arena is the first game in the series. It was revolutionary when it first came out, but now it looks like a pile of pixels with clunky mechanics. You get to visit all the provinces of Tamriel and even meet yours truly on Red Mountain. Nerevar, I have been around for a long time, but you only got to experience my greatness later. I'm impressed that technology allowed all of Tamriel to be accessible, but now you can barely fit one province into a game without minimizing it. Seriously, Nerevar, if you're going to play a retro game from 1994, you are just doing it to make a statement. Do you want me actually to believe you are enjoying the gameplay? Sure, if you are playing Arena for the plot, I understand that, but otherwise, what are you doing to yourself? The Elder Scrolls. 2 Daggerfall or Buggerfall is the second installment of the Elder Scrolls series that Bethesda crafted using pixels and a procedurally generated world the size of the United Kingdom. Seriously, Nerevar, everything keeps repeating and is very monotone. Yes, it is a big improvement compared to Arena, and the horse riding, exploration, and dungeon crawling aspects are quite fun. However, being from the 90s, it suffers from graphics that aged worse than the netch jelly that got left over from the first era. Nerevar, not even the Unity project can fix those god-awful sprites. Oh, and you want to play it for the plot? What a grand and intoxicating innocence. True, the plot might be compelling if you actually manage to understand it. Even those who have achieved Chim are having difficulty understanding what happened. Akatosh just used his dragon break powers and made the plot sort of irrelevant. Oh, Nerevar, whatever faction you joined automatically won, which does not make any ounce of sense. Akatosh is probably going to pull the same stunt with Skyrim. Then Bethesda decided to go through an action RPG phase in the late 90s with Enwa protagonists. An Elder Scrolls legend, Battlespire, made in 1997, features a dating sim gone wrong and Mehrunes Dagon. Once again, it is a bunch of pixels smooshed together. At least you see Mehrunes Dagon get absolutely humiliated by a battle mage wannabe. The game's plot might be somewhat interesting, it's just another cumbersome experience. The Elder Scrolls Adventures. Tomb Raider, The Elder Scrolls Adventures. Redguard was probably the worst-looking game in Elder Scrolls history. I understand pixels, but these graphics are a mix of Gwar droppings and Final Fantasy VII. At least the pixels were arranged a lot more gracefully in the previous Elder Scrolls games than whatever this foolishness was. You play as this Redguard named Cyrus and adventure through the island of Stros Makai. Who cares? The consequences on the lore are so minimal that the Elder Scrolls novels had a lot more to add than this game. No wonder Bethesda almost went bankrupt after releasing this abomination, and the whole Elder Scrolls universe would have ceased to exist before most of Sky Babies were born. Nerevar, this game almost deprived us of me, a god. How can you deprive a whole generation from a god? On the verge of bankruptcy from relying too much on Enwa characters, Bethesda had finally received my dreams and created the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, with 2 expansion packs, Tribunal and Blood Moon. Of course, this game became a commercial success. Yes, Nerevar, it was not too late for my mercy when God Howard came to Red Mountain and bowed in front of me. It features you and me as the most important characters in the game. The graphics didn't age well, but at least the gameplay mechanics were so great that they overshadowed whatever graphical deficiencies the game has now. My rich and unique homeland of Morrowind, especially the island of Vardenfell, is a fantasy setting that has not been appropriately recreated. It did not have your usual dragons, horses, and creatures you might get used to in your Western power fantasy. Instead, it relied more on otherworldly architecture. The Dunmer have the richest and most sophisticated culture of all the peoples of Tamriel. Don't mind the farm tools. They are just a testament on how merciful the Dunmer civilization is. The storyline is immersive, Nerevar. So much so, I, Dagoth Ur, will be remembered for generations to come. What do you mean this game is also cumbersome? Sure, we have cliff racers, goblins, and reeklings here and there, but it's a perfect game. What do you mean I am biased, Nerevar?
Thou forgot that the combat mechanics in Morrowind art horrid, and no modder to this day hath fixeth this abominable game flaw.
Ranni, this is an Elder Scrolls game list, not Elden Ring game list. Also, your game list only has 1 game so far, so please leave me be. I told you not to interrupt me during my sermons.
Well, Lord Dagoth, I do not thinketh thou require my services. I am going back to my game world, and leaving thou for good this time.
Rani, come back. Can't we just talk once my sermon is over? Look at what you've done, Nerevar. Do you realize how long it took me to smooth over our relationship last time? In any case, moving on. We shouldn't forget that Bethesda went through a strange mobile game phase between Morrowind and Oblivion, and during Oblivion. Morrowind was released in 2002, with Blood Moon, the last expansion, released in 2003, and then started an onslaught of pointless The Elder Scrolls Travels series. The mid-2000s were an unhinged era in their own right. The Elder Scrolls Travels mobile games also took you to many Enwa lands and made you do inconsequential lore-wise Enwa activities. I will briefly review each game, if you can call them that. Just as the Tribunal are false gods, these are false games. The Elder Scrolls Travels, Stormhold, was released in 2004, and it is essentially a prison break game where you have to escape a corrupted mongrel dog of the Empire who serves as a prison warden. The Elder Scrolls Travels. Dawnstar takes you to the Enwa Nord wasteland in Skyrim, known as Dawnstar. It was released in 2004. You fight some trolls and ice tribes, and that's basically it. The Elder Scrolls Travels. Shadowkey, released in 2005, takes us back to Redguard country, and you get to fight a monster named Umbra Keith, or whatever, that has attacked the village. I don't know why Bethesda is obsessed with the whole Umbra thing. The Elder Scrolls Travels. Oblivion. The mobile version of Oblivion came out in 2006, speaking of which. The Elder Scrolls. 4. Oblivion, otherwise known as the Mongrel Dogs of the Empire Simulator, was released in 2006 and is a long-awaited sequel to Morrowind. However, it has a lot more standard creatures like bears, wolves, zombies, and many other generic creatures that play into your Western power fantasy. Uriel Septim VII, a staple since the Arena games, and the Enwa who ordered my destruction, finally gets a taste of karmic justice by suffering a mythic dawn ouchie in the Imperial sewers. Such a grand and intoxicating innocence. He just stood there and took the hit. After that, you go on an adventure to defeat Mehrunes Dagon, and Martin Septim enters the Avatar state but gets turned into a statue, and you turn into Sheogorath. Main quests aside, the province of Cyrodiil, not counting the Shivering Isles, is home to the craziest Enwas in the history of the Elder Scrolls games. Just go to Anvil, Hackdirt, and Skingrad, and the amount of absolutely unhinged individuals that you will find in each of those places is already more than in Skyrim and Morrowind combined, and that is just the surface. I have no idea why, Nerevar, but even the factions were not in their right mind when you look back. As much as I prefer the ashy and bleak nature of Morrowind, I have to give it to Oblivion. It is one of the most colorful Elder Scrolls games out there. If you decide to visit the Shivering Isles, the colors and the randomness of the word get even more on the nose. Overall, Morrowind is more iconic, but Oblivion is definitely one of the more timeless Elder Scrolls games out there. Oh, before I forget, Oblivion almost had a PSP release, which did not happen. The Elder Scrolls 5. Skyrim came out in 2011, then again in 2013, then again in 2016, then again in 2021, then again... Oh, you get the point, Nerevar. That joke is older than Jagram Bagarn's belly grease. Skyrim is the frozen land of the Nords, who are basically orcs in human form. These Enwa Nords are not able to settle their little playground dispute, and the only reason they stopped was because fire-breathing cliff racers, otherwise known as dragons, showed up. Let's do a double take here, Nerevar. You are telling me we went through me, an ash vampire that spreads disease, to Mehrunes Dagon, a six-armed Daedric god, to the generic stereotype of dragons. This is supposed to be the Elder Scrolls. It is supposed to be revolutionary. It is supposed to be unique with its approach to fantasy, and they decide to center the plot around dragons. That and a bunch of lackluster factions aside, the DLCs somewhat made up for the problems of the original game. They did introduce some of those revolutionary, unique elements that were present in other games in the series. The Dragonborn and Dawnguard DLC had a better plot than the original. Also, with how vibrant the Skyrim modding community is these days, there are so many other experiences in Skyrim that surpass any Bethesda writing or design. Oh, Nerevar, you were expecting me to go into detail about Elder Scrolls Online. Ha! No. It's an online game that came out in 2014 with some expansions coming out at a later date. It is a lore black hole that features Molag Bal as the main antagonist. It's basically set in an Elder Scrolls world, but it is not actually an Elder Scrolls game. The fact that it is online makes the experience not worth it in my opinion. However, if I get 3,000 sleepers honoring the 6th house in the Tribe Unmourned, I will painstakingly review Elder Scrolls Online after I review the smaller DLC from Bethesda. I would like to conclude by saying thank you for listening to my sermon, and that the Elder Scrolls Legends and Elder Scrolls Blades were blatant cash grabs, and an excuse not to release the Elder Scrolls 6. Is this how you honor the 6th game and the players unmourned, Bethesda?